Good morning. Welcome to the estuariums at the Dauphin Island Sea Lab, our Boardwalk Talks program. We are coming to you live from the Rookery on Coffee Island this morning, and we're here with Dr. John Dindo, who has been researching birds here for a long time, and he is going to tell us about some of the birds that nest here. So with that, I'll let
Well,
John get started.
good morning, everyone. This is a beautiful morning to be out here. The winds are down, and we're here in a colony that's relatively new. It's been established probably in the last 5 years in this location. These birds consist of herons and egrets, and we'll point some of them out. The dominant bird that you see with the pink bill is a white ibis. Now, all of these birds at one point in time used to nest on Cat Island. Cat Island's about 6 or 7 miles to the east of us, but over the time, hurricanes have really diminished Cat Island, and there's no vegetation left. These birds nest in Iva and Baccharis. As you can see, they nest about 3 feet above the shell hash, and so this area has been protected for at least 5 to 6 years that these birds have been nesting here. This year, we estimate that the population's around 1,500 birds of the multiple species that are nesting. This is just one of the locations on Coffee Island that they're nesting. There are 3 other locations that they are nesting. If you listen carefully, you can hear the adults calling, but you can also hear the chicks in the background waiting to be fed. At daylight, the adults leave the island. The aquatic feeders like tricolor herons, little blues, snowies, they all go to the shoreline towards the marshes and feed in the marshes, while the cattle egrets and ibis go inland. The ibis go into freshwater areas and feed. And then around 9 o'clock, they all fly back to the island for the first feeding. And this back and forth cycle takes place all day long. Right behind me here, we see the first arrivals of cattle egret. Cattle egrets are the ones with the yellow bill, yellow feathers on their back. They are a very interesting bird in that they actually came from Africa. As the theory is that on the front of a hurricane that they arrived in South America years ago and have migrated north over that time frame all the way up into the Carolinas. And so they are late nesters in this area in that they feed in the agricultural fields. So they're just now establishing their nests, where these other birds have been here for approximately a month to 5 weeks. If we move up this way, we'll be able to see some of the chicks from the white ibis. Right here, these are white ibis chicks that are around 5 weeks old. They are starting to get their flight feathers, and within another 3 to 4 weeks, they'll be totally independent, although the adults will continue to come and feed them over that time frame. We have some students coming out here in the next few days. They're going to try to put some transmitters on these young birds so that as they become flight capable and they leave later in the summer, they can track where they're actually heading and what direction they go to. At one point in time, 20 some years ago, all of these birds migrated predominantly to the west, but because of changing temperatures where we don't get those large cold fronts, most of these birds stay in this area all year long, not necessarily on this breeding island, but in and around the vicinity.
We have a nest too, don't we?
Yes, so right here in front of us, there's a nest with 4 blue eggs in it, and those eggs belong to either a tricolor heron or a snowy egret. Their eggs are always blue, but if you pan over here to the eggs in these nests right here, you'll see that they're speckled and they're brown. Those belong to the white ibis.
And then we have a young
And then there's a young Ibis chick right here in front of us, hopping from nest to nest. Again, you can see just starting to get his flight feathers in. There's also black-crowned night herons right here out in the grass. They're a chunky bird with a real thick bill. They're nesting here as well. Black-crowned night herons, as well as great egrets. Tricolor herons, formerly known as Louisiana herons, are here. When we first arrived and pulled our boat up, there were 3 roseate spoonbills right here on a shoreline. They are very jittery birds, and they tend to move quickly, and they did. As we got in closer, they moved. Now there's a snowy egret displaying right in front of Angela. It's taking its crown of feathers and moving him up and down, right there. And again, one of the things you can see in that bird is its upper laurels. The upper laurels are where the upper part of the bill connects just below the eyes. And those upper laurels on that bird are bright red. That's indicating that that is a female that's inbreeding, which means the hormones are high. So she's getting ready to lay eggs. Once she lays eggs, those upper laurels will start to fade out, and that coloration will go away. So she's displaying right now over her nest site.
And then we have some chicks there.
And then these little chicks, the little white chicks with the yellow bill right in front of us, they were hatched probably, I want to say they were hatched around 8 weeks ago. Those are the chicks from a great egret. One great egret, and here's some more chicks over here walking, and the adult is right there, moving right there close to the nest. That's an adult with the breeding plumage. That breeding plumage is amazing. It falls out of the bird once all of the nesting is done. But in the 1930s and the 1940s, because of the fashion industry, ladies' hats had lots and lots of feathers in them, and so lots of these herons and egrets were eliminated out of these coastal islands, all the way from southern Georgia around into the Gulf of Mexico, and the birds were killed just for those feathers. Where if you wait about 2 weeks after the breeding cycle, the feathers fall out and can be gathered up right there in the colony.
So the birds that we see, the young ones that we see, about how old would you estimate them to be?
Okay, the little ibis that are running around through the colony here, they're about 3 to 4 weeks old. We can see them under the canopy and everything. They're around 3 to 4 weeks old. And the weather's we've had pretty mild weather without any storms. And so they have not been affected by anything. They have a good success. Now, the standard for herons and egrets as far as survival goes, these hatchlings have about an 80 to 85% mortality rate in their first year. So it's a high mortality rate, and that mortality is mostly natural causes, but that's just their normal mortality rate. Let's move down this way here, so we'll give these adults a chance to come back on their nest. It's not overly hot here, so right now today, so it's really not affecting their survival at all. In the middle of the summer, you want if you're out here in the summer, late June and July, there's still some nesting going on, but the disturbance factor there is really critical to those birds because the temperature is so hot, and the only way that they can cool is through buccal fluttering. They have no other mechanism to cool, so you can actually induce a lot of mortality by disturbance during the hot periods of time. We're moving along this edge. Coffee Island is one of the islands in this Portersville Bay area, and it's the only island that actually lies north-south. The other islands are all east-west islands. And as I said, Cat Island, known for probably over 150 years as a site for herons and egrets to nest, is no longer a site. That's how fast things change. I know 100 years seems like a long time, but in reality it's not. And so that island's no longer a habitat for nesting, and it maybe in the future it would come back, but at this point in time it's not.
So are some of these birds that are nesting out here protected?
So all of these birds are protected because they do undergo a migration of some type. So they are federally protected. You can't come out and just shoot these birds like ducks and stuff. There's two species out here that nest here that are listed in Alabama's threatened and endangered list. One is the Reddish Egret. The Reddish Egret has always had small numbers. In the 1980s on Cat Island, the largest number of Reddish Egret pair were 12 pair. Today, we only have found 2 pair of Reddish Egret. Those are the only 2 pair in Alabama that we know of. There's no other site that the Reddish Egrets nest on. Now, the interesting dilemma in that is if you go into Texas, Texas has lots and lots of Reddish Egrets. Florida has lots of Reddish Egrets. We're not really sure why this area, why Alabama and Mississippi does not have an abundance of Reddish Egrets. As a matter of fact, the Department of Conservation actually has a pre-proposal out for scientists to start looking at the Reddish Egret and maybe look at what are the causes of why their population's not growing. And that's something that's going to take place probably, it'll start in the next year or two.
So we're not encouraging people to come to the Rookery themselves. We're taking you on a trip out here to see.
Obviously, anytime man comes to a rookery like this, you disturb the birds. I mean, just as we're moving along, they get up, they leave their nest, they knock eggs out of their nest as they're moving. We just want people to see what a beautiful, lively habitat that we have in the diversity that we have in this habitat. The second species that's of concern in Alabama are American oyster catchers. So on this island here, on Coffee Island, which is spread out over a long distance, there are 4 pairs of American oyster catchers. Roger Clay, the non-game biologist in this area for the Department of Conservation, estimates that in the entire area of South Alabama, there are only 12 to 14 pair of American oyster catchers in all of Alabama. We've never found any on the eastern shore. All of them have been here in Portersville Bay area.
So we have a question about why is it called Cat Island?
That's a very good question. I remember doing a photo shoot for CBS News one time, and that question came up where it said, we're on Cat Island where there are, thank God, no cats. Have no idea. It's been named for over 100 years and shows up on charts as Cat Island. How that got formed, we have no idea.
What is the Cat Island in Mississippi? Was it named for raccoons, for Europeans that saw raccoons and mistook them for cats?
Absolutely. There are 2 Cat Islands. Obviously, Cat Island here in Portersville Bay of Alabama, then a Cat Island in Mississippi, off the shorelines of Mississippi, and that's correct. That the coming in from offshore, they saw these animals moving through the brush, which were raccoons, and they assumed them to be cats.
So let's review, how many species do we have on Coffee Island that we're looking at?
There are, depending if you count the Roseate Spoonbills, there are 7 to 9 species of herons and egrets here. Now, also nesting right along this beach line where we are, later in the year, there's going to be some terns. Later in the summer, there'll be terns that are nesting here. Again, the American oyster catcher, another species that is nesting here. So it's a very diverse community.
And what is the what do the birds like about this habitat? Like what may draw them to this area?
Well, two things draw them to this island. One, the vegetation that you're filming right now. That's that Baccharis and Iva, semi-woody vegetation above high tide, and it provides a support for their nest. So their nest, and you can see right here, their nest is right in between the branches of the Iva and Baccharis, and they throw together some grasses, and so it supports their nest. The second reason that this island is valuable to them is isolation. It's isolated. There's not a lot of disturbance out here. There are predators. The major predator out here are raccoons. Raccoons live throughout this marshy area. Raccoons will take eggs. Raccoons will take chicks. But there's not an abundance of raccoons. We've not seen an abundance of raccoons here.
If you pan over that way, Angela, I don't know that you can see them very well, but there's a pair of oyster catchers.
Quite a ways away.
Yeah.
They may get closer when we turn around and come back. Now the reddish egret nest, as I said, there's only two pair here. One of their nests is on this side, and another nest is on the other side, and that's the only two pair. Mendel just handed me a flight bone from a brown pelican. Very light. They're very lightweight, but very strong. I mean, the design of the wing bone is such for strength, and it gives them the capabilities of flight.
Zoom in on that.
I don't know if you can look in and see the little bones that support that wing. Actually, modern aircraft wings are designed from the bone of birds. How that structure is put together.
So as we look at the birds, one of them that you mentioned was interesting, that it had yellow feet.
Yes.
And black legs.
All right, let's. I don't see one right here right now.
Which
so
bird was that?
That's called the snowy egret. The snowy egret. It shuffles in the shallow water. Its yellow feet are very bright yellow, and so it gets in the shallow water and it shuffles its feet. And because of the color difference between the bottom and the water, fish move away from those yellow feet, and that's where the bird can see the fish moving and nail it as its prey. The other bird that we saw here just a little while ago was a peregrine falcon. Peregrine falcon was chasing one of the shorebirds. It did not get it, but it was chasing one of the shorebirds. We've seen earlier this spring, we've seen as many as 7 bald eagles on the shoreline of this area. Again, probably just loafing, but dead carcass of fish wash up on the shoreline, and they are carrion feeders. Now there's a reddish egret, right directly in front of us. You see him puffing his reddish feathers up. That's the one that's literally endangered and on Alabama's list, and one that will soon be studied.
So what is the mating time for the birds and the nesting? What's the typical time of year for that?
So these birds, along with brown pelicans, are called colonial nesters. And so normally what happens around the middle of March to the end of March, the older adult breeders arrive onto the site first. They pick a location where they want to establish their nest. And then the colony grows from that site outward. It could grow linear down the length of the island. It could grow circular as well, because the first arrivals becomes protected because all of the other ones on the outside. So mid-March to the end of March, site location, they come in, they start building their nests, and they will be here like cattle egrets, because they just arrived, they'll be here all the way through the end of June. Most of the wading birds will be done nesting, and their chicks will be flight capable, but they'll still be loafing around. They won't move until we get a big front. If we get a big hurricane front, something like that, then they'll all move.
So reddish egrets have an interesting feeding behavior. Can you?
Yeah, reddish egrets are.
I think you should demonstrate.
Yeah, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. Reddish egret are very unique. They feed in very shallow water, and they'll fly in and land in that shallow water, and then they'll spread their wings and dance. They'll dance all around that, and then at the final part of their dance, they expand their wings. And by expanding their wings, they create a shadow. And when they create a shadow, the fish that have been moving around from that bird dancing come up underneath the wing, and then the reddish egret will get their prey that way. One of the things that may be an impact on reddish egrets in the population size is the clarity of our water. Texas water is much more clear and Florida water than ours, so perhaps that might be a indicator of one of the issues with expanded populations.
We got a request for the demonstration.
Yeah, I'm sure you do, but that's not gonna happen.
It sounds like it's almost like a seine net. How it pulls in.
Yeah, basically, when they run around out there and dance around in the water, they're moving a lot of fish. And on bright sunny days, when they're doing that, and then they expand their wings, that creates a nice shadow effect. Boom! The fish run right to the shadows because they think it's protection, and it's a great feeding behavior.
Somebody asked if having hollow bones makes their bones fragile.
No, as a matter of fact, because of the design of the bone and the fine little hair structures within the bone itself, it gives it tremendous rigidity and support. You have to imagine these birds encounter all kinds of conditions, from hurricane force winds to, and for the most part, they do very well in those conditions.
Helene says, "Come on, John, let's see the demo."
No, that's okay.
So what are some other, one thing that I found interesting, a couple of weeks ago, you did a talk about pelicans on Gilliard Island, but you said they stay on Gilliard Island and these birds stay here on Coffee Island.
Well, right now, today, that's true. 3 years ago, I had a graduate student from Clemson that was working down here, and she was working on the population of brown pelicans on Gilliard Island. And during that 2-year period that she was here, a sub-colony started over on Cat Island when it still had vegetation. And that colony grew to be about 200, and then another fall storm came and wiped out the vegetation. That was the first and only year that we had brown pelicans nesting other than on Gilliard Island. Now, the population is pretty stable. We've counted in the neighborhood of 5,000 nests, so that's 10,000 birds on Gilliard, along with 2,000 or so sub-adults that are not nesting but are roosting there. The island's big enough to support 30,000 birds, but we believe that the carrying capacity of the bay, the food resources to feed that many, is what the limiting factor is.
Oh, I thought I saw an ibis over here feeding a chick.
You probably did.
Another interesting thing about this is, looking
Let's
at
walk
the
this way.
island. So
Yep.
looking along the island, you have the high vegetation here, but then on the other side, there's the marsh.
Correct.
What marsh grasses sit over there?
Well, most of that is juncus. Along the creek banks, you'll find spartina, but most of it's juncus or some of it's patens out here. And if you look straight across, you'll see another rim of woody vegetation, and that vegetation grows at the higher elevation in the shell hash.
I had a request to zoom in on the birds.
It's kind of hard to zoom in on them, and also we don't want to disturb them, but we do have a question from John DePlacido about how many times you've been pooped on.
That's just one of the factors of doing work out here in the colony. it happens. You learn not to look up. That's the main thing. Now here's the reddish,
Notice you're not wearing
really
a hat,
close.
though.
That you can zoom in on. That's a reddish egret. Beautiful coloration in its feathers. We're going to walk over and see if it has chicks in its nest or just eggs.
Are there differences in the vegetation here from Gilliard Island?
Well, oh yeah. Gilliard Island has a lot of invasives.
Well, is that
but-
part of the reason you see the different species?
No, because there are white ibis that nest on Gilliard Island. There are 3 glossy ibis that we saw nesting there as well. Yes, that reddish has chicks, and looks like she's feeding them right now. Yeah, moving some other ones out of the nest area.
Those ibis chicks she's
Yeah.
trying to
Ibis chicks
shoo
are
away?
yeah. Gorgeous.
And right ahead, it looks like there's, I guess that's another ibis, just seeing it with the white on its head.
With the blue coloration and the little white. No, that's a tricolor heron. There's one right here in front of you, just landed. That's a tricolor heron. That's the one that was formerly named Louisiana heron, but named tricolor. And the one species that we've only seen a couple out here, and they're not located at this location, are little blue herons. They're iridescent blue, but we don't have any right at this site here. Here's some chicks right here in front of Angela that she's photographing. These are again white ibis chicks,
They move pretty quickly.
and they do move quickly.
Tina says she votes to see the demo too.
This is not a voting matter.
We had a question. I've seen from Shelley. I've seen blue herons hold their wings in a way that expose their chest. Why would they do that?
I'm not sure. All herons and egrets have a gland that allows them to put a waxy substance on their wings that helps to make them waterproof. So other than that, perhaps getting that waxy substance spread on their chest feathers and around their body, that might be the reason they were doing that.
And then there are cormorants that we see in the winter that hold their wings open like that.
Yes.
But they have a specific reason. For
Yeah.
doing
So double-crested cormorants are abundant here in the late fall, all the way through December, January, and then about mid-March they'll start to flock together in these massive flocks. We'll have 2,000 to 3,000 in a flock, and then they start their migration back north. They end up in Michigan, Wisconsin, the Great Salt Lake. That's where they breed. The interesting thing with those birds, they are aquatic feeders. They actually go in the water and under the water for their prey, but they have a very, very limited oil. And so when they come out of the water after feeding, they sit on a shoreline or on a log or a piling with their wings totally exposed to the winds so that they can dry. Let's move on down this way. Yeah, Angela.
So we had a question from Helene. I've seen some blue herons
This
with
way.
a beard. Is that the male?
Say that one. I'm sorry. Repeat that question.
I've seen some blue herons with a beard. Is that the male?
A blue heron with a beard. I'd have to look at that.
Like the neck feathers, and sometimes they spread them out.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the coloration in herons and egrets, males and females, look almost identical. There's no real distinction between them. For example, right here you're looking at cattle egrets, looking at white ibis, and there's a snowy right in front of
the yellow
right,
feet,
with the yellow
black
feet.
legs.
You could probably zoom in on their feet. That's a snowy egret there. The ones that don't let us get too close are the black-crowned night herons. They're on these nests here as well, but I can see one standing out in the marsh right now. I see another one over there in the marsh. The disturbance factor on them is pretty high. They move out real quick.
Why are they called night heron?
That's a good question. There's two species in our area: a black-crowned night heron and a yellow-crowned night heron. The yellow crown is predominantly up in the freshwater.
John, what is this chick right here?
There's a little blue right back there. So what are we looking at?
The little brown chick right there. That's about the...
That's a tricolor heron chick right there, right in front of Angela's trying to get a photograph of it. That's a tricolor. It's kind of brown and mottled with a frizzy hairdo right now.
It looks like we have a couple of different babies around here. So the
Oh,
color
I'm sure we have.
and the
These are all white ibis chicks, tricolor chick. Over here in this nest, you see white feathers. Those little chicks there belong to the great egret.
Look, there's a... If you can... I don't know if you can get high enough. It was...
That's a great egret there too.
Little fluffy white one. Oh, there's one in the bush down there. White with green feet.
there he is. I see him.
Yeah,
He'll move faster than I can get to him.
yeah, they're pretty quick. And one of the things is, as we're in here, they are jumping out of their nest, but they'll return to that nest, especially if we move away relatively quick.
There's a night heron.
Right, that's the one I was seeing out there. Right, those are tricolor chicks. Those are probably about 4 days old, maybe 4 to 5 days old, with one egg still in the nest.
So we don't want to disturb them too much longer.
Correct.
So we'll kind of give everybody one last view. And we appreciate everybody for joining us. And I'll come back around to Mendel and John.
John, did you want to walk back that way?
Yeah, we'll start this going back towards the boat area. Again, this habitat is a critical habitat, and we bring it to you because, again, we want to explain the diversity that Alabama has in its avian species. But disturbance is a big impact. If we get a lot of disturbance, these birds will be gone and not return. So
When you say disturbance, what do you mean by that?
I mean by people coming up here and disturbing the birds off their nests. They again, today is ideal for us because the temperatures are cool, the sun's not out. On any other given day, the temperatures get up, we have induced mortality.
Can you explain that? Why disturbing the adults from the nest?
The longer the adults, again, these chicks have no way of getting rid of heat. So the adults actually, with a feather pouched area and their feet, are able to dissipate the heat that the birds are exposed to in the nest. But when you disturb these birds off the nest and the adults are gone, that puts the chick directly into the heat, and that's where the problems come in.
But these birds will come back. So when we leave, they're going to come back to their nest.
Well, if you turn around, they're coming right back to where we were. So yes, they're going to come right back. They're going to come right back to their nests.
Elizabeth wanted to let you know that your grandbabies are watching.
Wonderful. They've been here. From the shore, from the boat, they saw them from a distance.
All right, so Mendel, John, if y'all want to wrap up,
Well, thank you for joining us this morning, live from the Rookery on Coffee Island for our Boardwalk Talk. And we have Boardwalk Talks on the first and third Wednesdays of the month. While the estuarium is closed to the public, we have been bringing them to you virtually. And we look forward to you joining us again soon.
Enjoy Alabama.